There are things that we cannot see, things that fly through our skies at night. With our limited human vision, these things over the years have given us the shivers. We know these creatures are there and love them as part of nature, but their folklore is creepy and strange and often dark and mysterious. Welcome, dear friends, to another episode, and this time we will be looking at some very beautiful creatures whose realm is the night, flying through our skies under the moonlight. Our human eyesight is very limited by darkness. Animals and birds have better time of it, and some animals and birds reign over this time of the day. Because of this, our limitations of sight, we have developed a fear or awareness of those things that revel in the darkness. We consider them uncanny, supernatural, and possibly even full of dark magic. But equally, as creatures who are comfortable in the darkness and at a liminal time of the day, the dusk and the dawn, we also came to regard them as magical, wise, looking both forwards and back at the daylight and forwards to the darkness, able to travel in both realms with ease. And as liminal beings such as these, they are also thought to be able to travel between worlds, between our world and the other world. They are messengers and oracles. So, dear listeners, who are we going to learn about today? Who are these beautiful messengers of the darkness? Bats are some of the most intriguing little mammals. We love them, and at some point I would love to get a bat detector and find out which little fellows are calling around and about. I know some people find them creepy, much as mice and rats, but with wings, and such fantastical wings, like mini dragon wings created from flaps of skin, paper thin and yet so dexterous and strong. The bones supporting the wings are long, slender fingers. How wonderful is that? These are the only mammals that can truly fly, not just glide, but have the ability to fly as the birds do. And these creatures range from the tiniest in size at just over a mere inch, 2.5 centimetres, to the huge flying beauties such as fruit bats. But how often we see them depends on if we wander out into the dusk, about the last time that we can see them with our human sight. How many insects are flying around and how still we can be. Where we currently live in the mountains, we have about 5 bats that live somewhere in the ruined buildings and fly over the garden. We watch them out of our peripheral vision as they create an aerial ballet, trusting that they won't hit us by accident, and they never do, of course, because they are much too clever for that with their echolocation. So what of our folklore and superstition about the bats? As I said in the introduction, all of the creatures we are looking at today are considered liminal beings, and as such bats are associated with the dark and the light. They are uncanny. To do with things like witchcraft and otherworldly beings such as vampires and fairies. Once in England these beauties were known as the flittermaus, in German Fledermaus, in Swedish Fladdermus. Natural, of course, as English is a largely Germanic language, and this pretty name comes from the verb to flutter. In medieval English, though, they were called bacca, probably coming from the Latin blatta, meaning nocturnal insect. The Mayan people of South America have many bat characters in their folklore stories, and consider the bat the creature who guards the underworld of their beliefs, a place of darkness. In China, though, bats are lucky animals, often portrayed in art as good luck symbols and bringers of good fortune. Happy times are here to come, heralds of happiness. In the Chinese concept of yin and yang, light and dark, good and bad, positive and negative, female and male, bats are associated with yang and peaches with yin, And so in Chinese art, bats are often painted with peach boughs, symbolising the yin and the yang and the perfect balance. Carved buttons and beads were used to decorate the outfits of babies and children, as bats also brought the blessing of long life and good health. In ancient Egypt, the belief that failing eyesight, fevers, baldness and toothache could be cured by bats. I have no idea how the heck they used them, and I am not sure if I want to research and find out. However, what I did find out was that bats were hung over doorways to prevent all evil spirits getting in the house, much as witch marks were used in houses, barns and buildings in Europe. The ancient Romans and Greek people would place the figure or a picture of a bat beneath the pillows at night to prevent the sleep of those that they had a grudge against. In Spain, many cities have bats incorporated in their coats of arms. Valencia, Palma, Mallorca and Fraga have them, for example. In the days when Spain was many kingdoms, the court of Aragon had dragons and bats as part of its crest. The dragon is an obvious mythological emblem, but the bat is less so, despite the leathery wings in common. It was said that a bat, or in official records a swallow, but let's just ignore that little fact for a moment, it landed on the tent or the flag of King James of Aragon, El Rey Jaime de Aragon, on the night before a crucial battle against the Saracens for the city of Valencia. King Jaime ordered the bat removed and killed, but it wasn't. There are a number of legends about the little bat and why it ended up on the crest. In one, the bat flew in front of Jaime as he rode into the newly conquered Valencia, and in another, the nighttime antics of the bat inspired the king and his advisors to attack during the night, as everyone would be asleep. In medieval Europe, though, the bat was mostly considered with a wariness, full of dark folklore and magic, witches' familiars, and also in popular culture parts of their recipes for many potions, such as with the three weird sisters of Shakespeare's Macbeth. In Northern English and Scottish folklore, it was bats that carried messages from the devil to his witchery familiars. In the Tyrol region of Austria, wearing a bat's left eye was supposed to make the wearer invisible. Using a red thread to bind a bat's heart to the arm would bring good luck in card gambling. In a typical tragic tale of witch persecution, the Lady Jacome of Bayonne was burned to death as a witch in 1332. The reason? Many bats always flew around her house. Absolutely ridiculous and utterly dreadful. In Italy, it was told that to even have a bat flying nearby could bring on convulsions to those who were prone to them. Of course, the time of the year when it is darker, the winter months and the Sabbats of this time are associated with bats. The main one, of course, being Samhain, Halloween. And we can see this in the imagery and illustrations handed down to us from so far back in history to this day. And so bats were said to attract death to a household, but bats flying later in the evening heralded lovely weather on the way. To kill a bat that gets in the house brings extreme bad luck and even death. And if one lands for a rest and hangs from your kitchen ceiling, this will bring huge good luck. Beware if a bat flies around your head 3 times, you are not long for this world apparently. And in New York State, for a bat to be flitting around your home and a dog howling at the same time was the very darkest omen indeed. In Arkansas, dreaming of bats was a warning a close friend would pass into the other world soon. So in spiritual terms, what does the bat mean? As liminal creatures, they fly at the time between day and night, between past and future, and with this we take for ourselves that we too are in that space. Opportunity or change is coming that we must be aware of. What is gone, and we must take the lessons of then to wisely move forwards and embrace the change and opportunity and future, even if, like in the darkness of night, it is difficult to see clearly quite yet. Or maybe look at things from a different perspective, just as the bat hangs upside down. Bats are our guides through transformations that are upsetting or difficult, through the passing of the old and the birth of the new. Bats encourage us to trust our gut instinct when facing adversity, just as the bat flies using its senses through the night. Listen to your intuition, or maybe they are bringing messages from the other world to comfort and guide you. When you think about popular culture and the bat, they do pop up with the same liminal aspect. Even thinking of Batman, for example, he is an imperfect hero, damaged, living in-between state of Bruce Wayne during the day, becoming a flawed crime fighter during the darker hours. Vampires in film and stories have the ability to transform to bats, to fly under cover of night. Even though bat species that are blood drinkers are limited to very few, it is natural that they became a part of vampire lore. Dracula, Varney, Nosferatu, the vampires in Dr. Terror's House of Horror, Hammer's vampire portrayed by the brilliant Christopher Lee. All of these and more have a whole flock of flittermouse folklore surrounding them. And that gothic, romantic, sinister imagery inspires artists, writers and creatives all over the world, including me. Now to fairy lore and some examples of how bats are associated with the good folk. On the Isle of Man there is said to be an enchantress, beautiful to behold and captivating the hearts of any man she considered her latest victim. And these victims could be many. Once all of the men of the Isle of Man were in her thrall, riding as white as snow this palfrey she led her victims. She travelled the island, and the men one by one trailing behind her and her horse. In this way she led her victims into a deep river, and they followed completely witless. As soon as she saw they were deep enough in the water, she raised a gust of wind with her magic, and now trapped the river's waves rose higher and higher, until one by one the whole crowd of poor fellows were swallowed by the water. It was said there were around 600 victims that day. Once all of the men were gone, she transformed into a huge bat and flew high in the air until she could be no longer seen, and her horse transformed to a porpoise and disappeared into the now still river. I think we can say that a great majority of people love butterflies, but not so many can say the same about moths. Moths are creatures that have an uncanny atmosphere about them. Lots of people are really scared of them. I used to be one of these people. Then, after marrying Marc, who is a biologist by education, I learned to appreciate them for their beauty and mystery. And truly, yes, they are beautiful. We don't usually appreciate their colours. Often there are subtle shades of browns and tan and black, and yet sometimes moths can be extremely strong in colour with incredible markings. There are many more species of moths as opposed to butterflies, making almost 94% of the flying beauties we call Lepidoptera. Now the butterflies are seen as omens of lovely things fluttering your way, and yet, as with most night creatures, moths are seen as darker in message, and sometimes even warn of danger or death. In the mid-1800s, the folklorist Robert Hunt gathered folklore from the West Country of England, Cornwall, Devon, Somerset and Dorset. He had collected a story told to him by a Mr. Toms, explaining that in Cornwall some people regarded moths as the souls of departed people. Some thought they were fairy folk, who they called pisgies. Another folklore collector tells us that the mothers of young children in Cornwall would tell their little ones that pisgy moths would play tricks on them while they slept. And moths as fairies constructing dreams seem to abound in Cornish folklore. In her story The Little Cake Bird, the Cornish writer and folklorist Ennis Tregarthen wrote that in and around the village of St. Column, the belief was that fairies would tiptoe over one's nose and rearrange the stories of dreams as people slept. Of course, the legendary Queen Mab, Queen of the Fairies, is called the midwife of dreams and is so tiny that she travels by insect. Which came first, the folk belief or the written character? Also in Cornwall, near the truly lovely fishing and holiday village of Looe, we find St Nun's Well, one of Cornwall's many holy wells and waters. It was here that bent pins would be left as offerings by visitors. Those who failed to leave offerings at the well would be followed relentlessly and hounded by the pisgy moths who lived by that well. From Somerset we are told of a lady living in the Blackdown Hills. The lady encounters a large brown moth that flies past her, and its wings touch her eyes as it travels, and from that moment she is able to see the fairy folk. Despite the connotations with darkness and warnings of misfortune, moths are also symbolic of personal transformation, much as their daytime sister the butterfly is. These are liminal creatures, living in the dark and yet hopelessly attracted to bright lights. Because of this pull to the light, moths are seen as symbolic of the soul, yearning to leave the darkness of wickedness and reach towards the light of holiness. They are also associated with change and transformation, and to be careful as we make our way through sticky situations. As with the butterfly, moths are also symbols of fertility. These are great pollinators, and so the association with bringing of all good things seems obvious, as with the bees, butterflies and other pollinators. Hard work brings reward. A moth close by you heralds a letter or important news is on its way, and if a moth gets into your house, beware of an argument with your love, or plotting by enemies even. And yet in China, should a moth visit the inside of your home, then good luck will soon follow. It is bringing you blessings. For the Celts, the moths were thought of as those who could travel between our world and the other world, taking and bringing messages, and are associated with death and decay. As with most creatures or even flowers that come in a variety of colours, the individual colours of moths can mean different things. There is a belief in folklore that white-coloured moths are symbolic of purity and innocence, and yet others regard them as omens of death, if in the home, I suppose like little ghosts. Should a white moth flutter near a spinster, it brings news that she will find a true love soon. And they are also bringing messages from those of our family who have sadly passed away. Moths, brown in colour, and so affiliated with more natural colours within nature, are believed to symbolise more grounded elements such as safety and stability. Black moths warn of the death of a loved one or bad news to come. Yellow-toned moths tell us we must stay positive in adversity, and green-hued moths help us through times of personal growth and change. Now we have spoken of moths in general, let's have a look at some individual species, and some from folklore. One of the books I found fascinating when younger, and the film also, was Silence of the Lambs. Take away the murder aspect of the story so brilliantly told, and you have the symbolism of the moth that ties into those species' actual folklore. We are, of course, talking of the death's head hawk moth. Hawk moths, all of them, they are stunning creatures. The size for a start, and then the colours and the markings impressive, and almost a little intimidating for someone who had a phobia of moths once. However, even I cannot fail to be awed by these beautiful moths. They are indeed gothic and regal and spectacular. And we are going to look at the death's head, so iconic and medieval looking to me. Dark browns and blacks with that beautiful skull upon the thorax painted by nature. And so obviously for some this moth became an omen of evil or death. They even feed as caterpillars on the deadly nightshade plant. Even the name of these moths belie their connection to death in the underworld. We have Acherontia Atropos. Atropos is the third of the 3 Greek fates, those goddesses who spin the story of each human life, and it is she who wields the sharp scissors that cut human life thread, bringing passing to the next realm. and Acheron, the river of pain spoken of in Greek mythology, flowing through the underworld. Another moth in this group is Acherontia Styx, named for the river Styx that the new soul must cross to gain entrance to the other world. And Acherontia Lachesis, another of the Greek fates, this time the one who measures the thread of each human life. In The Silence of the Lambs, the protagonist murderer has these moths and larvae everywhere in his terrifying house. It is his shrine to transformation, the larvae to the death's-head hawk moth, he to the butterfly of femininity, using the symbolism of death and murder. In the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker, they are used as symbols of sinister death once more. Dracula uses these huge moths as a threat to Renfield. As a symbol in pre-Raphaelite art paintings, the death's head moth was used to give narrative to the subject, usually of lovers. This love was fated to fail. For all of this gothic darkness, though, these moths are not only harbingers of doom, but again represent transformation for us, a liminal time of choice, and also the brief passing of time of our mortal lives, a reminder to live life to the full as we have it. Now let's have a look at another fascinating moth, one that produces something so treasured by we humans, silk, and the silkworm moth. Its taxonomic name is Bombyx mori. It feeds almost exclusively on mulberry leaves and is virtually completely dependent on human help to survive, due to millennia of selective breeding. It is the cocoon of the moth pupae that are the silk threads. Each cocoon, once unpicked, creates a raw silk thread of up to 900 metres, which is 3,000 foot long. Sadly, the caterpillar is killed in the production of the silk thread from the unwound cocoon, although some moths are allowed to pupate in order to continue the production process. Cocoons from these moths are usually broken, but even these pieces are still used for stuffing and padding. The folklore of how on earth the cocoons were found to create the most stunningly exclusive fabric is a quite wonderful tale. In the era of the Yellow Emperor, the empress of the time was Lei Zhu. One day, she was resting beneath a mulberry tree when a moth cocoon fell from a branch above her, and yet when she looked at it, it hadn't just fallen, but fallen right into her cup of tea. She removed the cocoon and noticed a small thread poking from it. This thread she very carefully and delicately unwound, and inside was the silkworm pupae. She had discovered a most remarkable thread, and a most remarkable thing, and the creature who had made it. It was she who then created the beginnings of the whole industry of Chinese silks, the secret of production being kept for hundreds of years. The secretive silk was brought to the West by a princess of China, and from then what became as the Silk Road or the Silk Route was created. She had been promised in marriage to a king of Central Asia. It is believed that she smuggled silk cocoons out of China in her extravagant hair ornamentation to bring to her new home and spread the knowledge of silk production. From then the Silk Road and all of its trade and stories grew from this single act of conspiracy and this single thread. In Vietnam, another tale tells of the silk moth, and in this tale there was once a beautiful housemaid living and working at the home of utterly awful and despicable and lascivious masters. She fled from this place into the mountains, where the mountain god gave her shelter and protected her. Sadly, her safety was not to last, though. From the heavens to earth came a god full of lechery and corruption. He saw her in her mountain sanctuary and attacked her, but she fled once more and was hidden by the deity of the mountains once again. Now the evil god decided to try and set a trap to catch this beautiful human woman, and he set a fine net all around the mountain where she was hiding. It was only with the permission of the divinity that the beautiful young woman was given a way of escape. She was given the magical ability to eat and swallow the whole net from around the mountain and keep it in her stomach away from her pursuer. Now the evil god was incensed, and he petitioned his fellow gods of thunder and rain to attack her, and this they did. The lightning hit her, and her clothes were burned to nothing but ash, left naked and shivering in the pouring rain. Now she fled into a quiet dark cave, where she threw up the fine net and covered herself in it so that she could rest and be warmer. With everything that had happened to her, though, the fear, the attack of the lightning, the drenching in iced water and the pursuit, well, sadly she passed away quietly in her sleep. And yet as she passed, her soul self wished only to be of help for others, that they would not suffer as she had. And as she passed away, her soul left her mortal body and transformed into many beautiful silk moths, a tragically poignant folk tale. I couldn't leave the subject of moth folklore without looking at a more modern piece of folklore and high strangeness, and this is the cryptozoological creature, the Mothman of Point Pleasant. Now, I'm not going to go into detail of this fascinating subject, because if you know, you know, and if you don't, but love a bloody good tale of weirdness, then have a Google or look on YouTube and fall down the Mothman's very own deep and extensive rabbit hole. All I will say, though, the association of moths to warnings of death and harbingers of doom, well, you can't get more appropriate a creature than a Mothman for the tragedy of the Silver Bridge and all the bizarre happenings around this case. I had never heard a nightingale while living in England, but here where we are at the moment on the mountain, nightingales sing often during the darkness, and they have an eerie song piercing the night when pretty much all else is quiet. And in the mountains sound travels very far, but we know that they nest not too far from our land, secretly. They are quite nondescript birds, little brown jobs, once classified as related to thrushes, now classed as flycatchers, but they are pretty and beautiful for that. But to hear one is a thing of wonder. Their song has a huge variety of sounds, trills, bubbles, whistles, almost seemingly never the same sound twice. But it is there if you listen long enough. Now, let us look at the stories of the beautiful nightingale. The name nightingale obviously comes from night and galan, meaning to sing. In Old English it was pronounced Nightingale, night songstress. The belief that the female bird created such gorgeous song, whereas it is actually the male singing for territory and a mate in the quietest times, so that their calls carry as far as possible. Ancient poets were inspired by the nightingale. Aristophanes compared its song to poetry, Virgil to the mourning of Orpheus on the death of his wife Eurydice. Shakespeare also loved the nightingale, using the term philomel for the nightingale bird. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, Philomela was the princess of Athens who was attacked and mutilated by her sister's husband. Her tongue was removed by him so she could not tell of his crimes against her. The gods and goddesses took pity on her, turning her to a nightingale to keep her safe from this utter, well, you can imagine. And from then on, poets would honour this tragic young woman by using her name in their works. Shakespeare's Sonnet 102 declares, "Our love was new, and then but in the spring, when I was wont to greet it with my lays, as Philomel in summer's front doth sing, and stops his pipe in growth of riper days." Medieval Europe saw nightingales as creatures symbolising love and desire, the intense emotion of love's passion and the bittersweet yearning for a secret loved one. Chaucer wrote the Parliament of Fowls, and in this the nightingale is spoken of as representing the pain and pleasure of unrequited love. Of course, the poets considered the nightingale one of their muses, the beauty and clarity of voice, messages from somewhere otherworldly to human ears. Percy B. Shelley, the tragic poet who passed way too young, husband of Mary and friend of Byron and Polidori, wrote of poets and nightingales, A poet is a nightingale who sits in darkness and sings to cheer its own solitude with sweet sounds. His auditors are as men entranced by the melancholy of an unseen musician, who feel that they are moved and softened, yet know not whence or why. And this sums up that ephemeral sound that comes to us through the darkness. It seeps into our hearts and has a sigh at its beauty, but doesn't it also sound a little melancholic? Wordsworth, Keats and Coleridge also wrote of the effect of the nightingale on their own work, and the longing to create something as pure. It is no surprise, then, that the nightingale is associated in folklore with purity, virtue, goodness and spirituality, but also the brevity of beauty, fleeting time, and how bittersweet that song lasts so short a time, just as beauty does. Ukraine has the nightingale as its national bird, the mythology being that once the bird was found only in India, it travelled the world and to Ukraine, and here the little bird listened to the sad but beautiful songs of the Ukrainian people. This made the bird sad too, and then the little brown bird began its own song to try and bring happiness to those who were listening, to the people of Ukraine. And from that day the people sang happy songs also. Every year the nightingales would return to Ukraine to hear the happy songs of the country and join in with the melodies. Iran is a country that also has the nightingale as a national bird. In medieval Iran, Persia, the nightingale abounds in literature. The writings from this era teach us its song had it to represent the lover who charms and sings sweet words to their would-be sweetheart, and yet loves in vain. The rose, the symbol of earthly beauty, is the object of the nightingale's affections, but it is a love doomed to fail, of course, a true love though, passionate and all-encompassing. In both Japanese and Chinese cultures, the nightingale represents beauty, elegance and spiritual awakening. In China, the birds are symbols of spring, of renewal and rebirth and the arriving of spring bounties after the cold, hard winter months. And in Japan they are pictured with the beautiful sakura blossoms, the beautiful pink cherry blossoms, or in the moonlight, symbolising how fleeting beauty and indeed human life is. In the Sufi tradition, the nightingale is extremely revered. They are spiritual guides. Their songs bring enlightenment to the searcher as they bring us their message from the divinities. In Sufism, the nightingale song is believed to represent the human soul reaching for God and divine love, how the soul is constantly connected to the other world. Sufi poets speak of nightingales in so many poems, representing the longing to be more spiritual, to be more aligned to the divine. Practitioners of Sufism use the song of this pretty bird to aid in meditation as a focus, as an aid in spiritual work. There is a lovely tale written by Hans Christian Andersen of the Emperor and the Nightingale. Once there was a very powerful emperor in China, and in the palace gardens lived a nightingale. Its song was famous far and wide, and it was more beautiful than even the imperial palace. The Emperor of Japan sent a book to the Chinese emperor, and in this book it told all about the nightingale. Neither the Chinese emperor nor anyone in his court had ever heard of this bird, so he sent for it to be caught and brought to him, which was done with the help of a poor kitchen maid. It was now that the emperor heard the bird sing so beautifully, and tears welled in his eyes, a rare thing. The nightingale from that day would be a most treasured guest at the palace, and it sang every night for the emperor. Not so long after, the emperor received another gift. This was an automaton, a bejewelled nightingale wind-up toy that sang with a song so similar to the nightingale, and the emperor was delighted with this jewel, this new toy, even though the toy bird only sang the same song over and over. The neglected nightingale bird secretly left the palace now, sad that the emperor, once such a friend, should choose a toy over him, a living bird. The emperor, once he had found the real bird, had gone, he banished the nightingale from the palace and its grounds in temper, and now he placed the toy next to his bed and wound it up every night so that he could hear it singing him to sleep. Over time, though, and over much use, the cogs of the automaton wore down, and in the end it could only be played once a year. And life at the imperial palace continued this way for 5 long years, until the emperor fell very ill, and death hovered very close by, telling him of the wicked deeds of his life. The emperor would look longingly at the jewelled nightingale, and wish it would play so it could sing his fears and shame away, but it no longer worked. Life would end soon, and the emperor would have his reckoning. And then, from the still night, one night, a beautiful song drifted through the open window, and here now was his old friend, the true nightingale. The bird sang sweetly, and the emperor rested and slept. The song spoke to Death, who decided to leave for a while. And over time the emperor was healed by the precious brown, real nightingale. Once the emperor was well again, he invited the nightingale to come back to the palace as before, but the bird declined the offer. He decided would travel all of the places in the kingdom, and on his return to the palace he would tell the emperor all of the tales that he had heard. But this must remain a secret between the bird and the man. I'm sure many of you know the song A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square. Berkeley Square in London, a strange place for this reverie of a young man in love who hears such melodious song. Surely it's his imagination. Or is there a tradition of nightingales in London? Such a busy, bustling and noisy capital, even in the Victorian era, not exactly an ideal nightingale territory. It is too often the way of humans to find something natural and beautiful, and rather than leave it where it is and appreciate its beauty from afar, and simply knowing it exists in nature, to instead want to claim it, catch it and own it. And this was so with the poor nightingale. 1819 saw the poet John Keats write Ode to the Nightingale. This poem is so very poignant but full of love for what he calls the dryad of the woods. The juxtaposition of this beautiful poem was that thousands of nightingales were trapped each year to be sold in the East End of London as caged singing birds on market days for as little as a penny a bird. Nightingales do not cope in captivity, and during May thousands of little bird corpses would litter the streets of Whitechapel, one of the poorest London districts, the dead birds tossed aside by people equally in cages themselves. Acts like this and the wasteful wealthy fashion of pinning dead exotic birds and bird feathers to hats and clothing led to the beginnings of conservationism in Britain, and the beginnings of such charities as the RSPB, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. It is tragic to this day that the nightingale, once so prevalent in the wooded areas of London's outskirts, were so many that this waste was a common occurrence. Today in the whole of Britain hardly any nightingales return. There are hardly any nightingales at all, and these are becoming increasingly rare due to what would be... Today in the whole of Britain there are hardly any nightingales that return. They are becoming increasingly rare due to what we would deem human progress. And so nightingales are seen in all cultures as messengers of the spiritual realm and the human world. They are symbols and talismans of secret love, divinity, purity, passion and love. Their magic brings us the ability to bring about new beginnings, awakening and deepening spirituality and connections to divine energy. They bring us the magic of spring and entrance with their unique song, and they fill our hearts with a delight, but also poignancy and yet hope. In short, the nightingales are treasures that truly are hidden in plain sight. And so, dear friends, we come to another end of another episode, and this time all about strange creatures of the night. I will do another episode of nighttime creatures, and I'll focus then on things like foxes and badgers, things that walk in the night time, not just fly. However, this has been an interesting one to research and study, and I learnt a lot during this, and it was really nice to bring in some modern folklore such as the Mothman. It just shows how folklore and story still threads us all together and comes and goes and grows and grows and grows over time. And that these strange things can happen to any of us at any time when we least expect it. And isn't that a wonderful thing? So for now, dear friends, until next time, take care of yourselves, brightest of blessings, and remember, don't play with the fairy folk in the dark, or you may end up in one of my folk tales yourself.